Welcome everyone. This is my presentation on immigrants and origins. I call it the secret life of the ukulele. Aloha everyone. I'm Stuart Yoshida. I'm a performer, instructor, and founder of the Ooktown Podcast. That's ooktown.com/podcast, where we talk about all things ukulele. We just completed our 10th anniversary show. I can't believe it. I didn't think we would be around this long. I didn't know where the ukulele would be going here on the mainland. I am from Hawaii, and it's always been popular there. And I started off my ukulele journey while on a trip back home visiting my family in 1999, where I commissioned a custom-made ukulele from a luthier named David Gomes. Hopefully you can see this. That's my custom ukulele. David Gomes is of Portuguese ancestry, and we'll talk a little bit about why that's so appropriate. And ever since then, I've been polishing my skills and teaching about the famous dancing flea. So welcome to my workshop on origins and immigrants. This class will be a mixture of history, storytelling, and sing-alongs. And I think you're probably very experienced with Zoom. So yes, when you're singing along, please mute yourselves. Otherwise, it does sound like a box of ukuleles falling down some stairs, as my co-host likes to say. But we can do some sing-alongs if you want. Please follow along and any of these songs that you know. But mainly it's about learning the history and origins. And we'll find out why this quintessentially Hawaiian instrument landed on the shores of a remote island, and I mean remote, and we'll tell you why, captured the hearts of the native people, and soon went on to conquer the world. So I want you to remember that 7 things that might be you never knew about, things that are so important to the origin of the ukulele. And those 7 things are 2 plants and 1 bird. It's 3 people, and it's 1 ship. And we're going to go over all of these things. But before we do, let's go way, way back in time. And I'm talking about in the beginning, and that means 65 million years ago. Yes, 65 million years ago, a mountain emerged in the middle of the Pacific from a deep rift beneath the ocean. Lava spouted from this rift, and it grew and grew into a mountain, like the one that's growing right now off the coast of the big island of Hawaii. That's right. Kilauea is creating another island, and in a few million years, we will have another Hawaiian island. And so 65 million years ago, this emerging landmass would become the most remote place on Earth from any civilization. What does this mean? It means that from that point in the Pacific Ocean, you could measure in miles to any other civilization, and it was the longest distance you would have to travel to reach another civilization. So it was remote. And the Hawaiians believed that one man was responsible for the formation of the island. And this man was Maui, and they call him the Hawaiian Superman. So I'd like to sing my first song for you. So if you know it, join along. It's called Maui, Hawaiian Superman. Well, tall is the tale of the mischievous one who fished out all the islands and captured the sun. Well, his deeds and tasks I will unmask so that you'll understand that before there was a Clark Kent, there was a Hawaiian Superman. Yes, before there was a Clark Kent, there was a Hawaiian Superman. Yes, you see, Maui Was the demigod of the Hawaiian legends. So let me tell you about the story of Maui and one of his wonderful deeds that he did. He was kind of a trickster, all right? He was known for causing mischief all over the place. And one of the things that he was most interested in doing was capturing the fish god of the Pacific there. Now, this was kapu. This was not something you do. You do not go out and catch the fish god of the ocean. But Maui wanted to do that. So he took his magic sea hook and he tricked his brothers. He said, "Brothers, I think this is a wonderful day. Hey, brother, let's go out and go into the canoe and we go paddling out there in the middle of the Pacific. All right?" And so the brothers said, "Yeah, sure, that sounds good." So they all jumped into the canoe and they started paddling. But Maui had a plan. He said, "Brothers, hey, brother," he said, "whatever you do, do not look back. When I tell you to paddle, you paddle." All right? So as they were out in the ocean having a good time, Maui took his magic sea hook and he threw it out into the water again and again, waiting for the fish god. And suddenly, he felt a tug on the magic rope and the magic hook. And he says, "Hey, brother, paddle, paddle, paddle." And so they kept paddling and paddling, and they paddled so hard and so fast they could see the wake of the canoe splashing up on the side. And as they kept going and going, Maui pulled and pulled and pulled, and he pulled the fish god out of the sea. And he saw it, 1 hump, 2 hump of the fin, 3 hump, 4 hump, 5 hump. And when they got to the 8th hump, suddenly from the water splashed the gourd into the canoe. But this was not any ordinary gourd. It was an enchanted gourd. And this gourd turned into the beautiful goddess Hina. And the brothers were so surprised to see this beautiful goddess in front of them, they suddenly stopped and Maui said, "Away, away," because then he could no longer pull up the fish god. And so there was only 8 humps of the fish god that he could pull up, and those are the islands of Hawaii. And that is the story of Maui and the origin of the islands of Hawaii. So, but wait, did the Hawaiians invent the ukulele? And if not, where did it come from? How did it end up as a quintessential Hawaiian instrument? And even more importantly, who or what could make this barren land hospitable? I mean, what could live on this? Because lava doesn't turn into soil, right? Well, here's how. Immigrants, we get the job done. Yeah, there were some important visitors to this newly formed islands that came drifting onto its shores and changed the course of history for the islands. Changed it forever. And those were 2 plants and 1 bird. In particular, how could life begin? And it's thanks to this plant, the Ohia Lehua. Any of you who are from Hawaii or have been to Hawaii and you've been to the big island near the volcano, you'll see this plant all over. And what's special about the Ohia Lehua is, and similar plants, is that the Ohia Lehua can survive without soil. It can live on lava, and it pulls the moisture from the lava and the air and the nutrients, and it can live and die. And it lived and it died there for generations, slowly, slowly building up the soil, the incredible rich soil there in Hawaii, making it from just the air and water around it. It did not need any soil. And this is why we have life in Hawaii. The Ohia Lehua and all the other plants that are like it are the reason why we have life in Hawaii. Without it, there could be nothing there. It would just be still a volcanic island. And the second thing that was so important is the golden plover. And I'll tell you in a minute why it is, but I want to give you a little song. It's called Star of Gladness, Hokulea, performed by Israel Kamaka Viva Ole. Raindrops, they hamper my vision, falling down and cutting incisions in my mind, while we sail away our time. Blow makani and shout jubilation, and carry us down to our destination. Oh, wiki wiki, Keala Tahiti. Millions of stars up in the sky, looking up they all make us high. But Hokulea, star of gladness, Hokulea, star of gladness. Hokulea, the guiding star. So how did the Hawaiians get to Hawaii? There was no one there to begin with. Well, let me tell you the story. Down in the South Pacific, in the Marquesas, there were people living there that were amazing navigators. They could use the stars to navigate back and forth between the islands. And they were so good that this is what they did. They noticed a bird, a plover, that would come, migratory bird that would come back and forth throughout the seasons, and they wondered, where is that bird going? And I don't know about you, but I don't know if I would do this. But what they did is they followed that bird. So a bunch of them got into their double-hulled canoes and sailed with the bird. Now, the thing is, this bird flew faster than the ships, than these canoes, even the double-hulled canoes could go. So they would follow the bird every season as far as they could. They would stop and look where they were, using the stars to guide them, go back home, and then the next season they would go to that exact spot and wait for the birds, and then to follow them further. And they did this season upon season until finally there appeared a star, a North Star, over the islands of Hawaii. And this is how Hawaiians came to the shores. They followed a bird, and they followed Hokulea, the star. Now, Hokulea, some of you may know, is actually a ship that they used to prove that the Hawaiians could actually do this, to just use the stars to navigate to go to the South Pacific. And so a group of people formed the Hokulea Project. They built a double-hull canoe with the sails, and they sailed out from Honolulu Harbor down to Tahiti. And that is what this song Hokulea is about. It's about the journey of the people of Hokulea. And they did it. They sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti without any navigation other than the stars and the seas and the currents. And so this plover was very important in the journey of the ukulele, because without the plover, there would be no Hawaiian people. And the third thing is a plant that I want you to remember. It's called sugarcane, or ko. It was brought by the Hawaiians from their native lands in the South Pacific into the islands of Hawaii, where they cultivated it. And I want you to remember this later on, because it is so important in the history of the ukulele. So these three immigrants, the Ohia Lehua, the Pacific plover, and sugarcane, were so key in the secret life of the ukulele. But let's talk about some people. And these people were just as important in the history of the ukulele. I want to talk about a captain. The captain is James Cook, the first European to visit Hawaii in January 1778 when he landed at Waimea Bay on the island of Kauai, and who named them the Sandwich Isles after the Earl of Sandwich, who had sponsored his trip. And so naming things after corporate sponsors is not a new thing. Captain Cook died in Kalakawa Bay on the Big Island of Hawaii during a battle, but the careful charting of Captain Cook allowed other Westerners, for better or worse, to come back to the Hawaiian Islands and begin trade with the Hawaiians. Without Captain Cook, there would have been, the ukulele would have never come to the Hawaiian Islands. And it's also a story of a carpenter. And the carpenter's name was Manuel Nunes. And we'll talk more about him later. But he was one of the key figures in bringing ukuleles to Hawaii. And finally, a king. King David Kalakawa, a patron of the arts, music, and culture of Hawaii. He's credited with promoting the ukulele and bringing it to prominence as part of the royal court, along with hula and pride in the culture of Hawaii. He revived that. Each year, he's actually honored in a Merry Monarch Festival, and hopefully they will have that next year. But every year they would have a Merry Monarch Festival, which was a celebration of music, hula, and Hawaiian culture, dedicated to the memory of King David La'amea Kalakawa, known as the Merry Monarch, for his flamboyant and fun-loving ways. Kalakawa was elected King of Hawaii, the Hawaiian nation, in 1874, and he reigned until his passing in 1891. And so during this time, the kingdom prospered. There was much commerce in this time. One of the huge industries during this time, for example, was whaling. Hawaii, because of its location, was a perfect spot for refueling and transit point. In fact, the town of Lahaina, for those of you who have been to Maui, is on the western shore of Maui, and it became the busiest whaling seaport in the Pacific, and probably because it was really the only spot in the Pacific you could come. It was a place for ships to come and resupply with water and food. And the sailors would come to town to have a good time, drink in the bars. And this was much to the consternation of the growing missionary community. So they did not really appreciate the sailors coming to town. However, this reminds me of a song about a seaport and the sailors who came there. Many of you might know this. So if you do, even though I can't see you or hear you, I'm going to imagine that you're singing along during the chorus, because during the chorus, it goes, Brandy, you're a fine girl. And you can sing along, you're a fine girl. And then the next line is, such a fine girl. And then finally it's, so that's what I want you to sing along with. Even though I can't hear you, I'm going to imagine you out there singing along with me. And here's a story about a girl named Brandy in a western port somewhere, I imagine, in the Pacific. So here we go. It's called Brandy. There's a port on a western bay, and it serves 100 ships a day. Lonely sailors pass the time away and talk about their homes. And there's a girl in this harbor town, and she works Laying whiskey down, they say, Brandy, we'll fetch another round. And she serves them whiskey and wine. Here we go. The sailor said, Brandy, you're a fine girl. What a good wife you would be. Well, your eyes could steal a sailor from the sea. Oh, Brandy wears a braided chain made of finest silver from the north of Spain. A locket that bears the name of a man that Brandy loves. Oh, he came on a summer's day bearing gifts from far away, but he made it clear he couldn't stay. No harbor was his home. The sailor said, Brandy, you're a fine girl. What a good wife you would be. But my life, my lover, my lady is the sea. Oh yeah, Brandy used to watch his eyes as he told his sailor story. She could feel the ocean fall and rise as she saw its raging glory. But he had always told the truth, Lord, he was an honest man. And Brandy does her best to understand. At night, when the bars close down, old Brandy walks through a silent town and loves a man who's not around, but she still can hear him say, she hears him say, Brandy, you're a fine girl, what a good wife you would be. But my life, my love, and my lady is the sea. Oh yeah, said Brandy, you're a fine girl, what a good wife you would be. But my life, my love, and my lady is the sea. Yeah, my life, my love, and my lady is the sea. All right. So let me admit someone here and we'll continue with our story. Well, in addition to whaling, another very prosperous industry that came was the sugarcane industry. Remember that coal plant I talked about that the Hawaiians brought with them? Well, the production of sugar from the plant grew into a lucrative industry, especially during the Civil War era when the South was prohibited from supplying sugar. And so this became one of the biggest money makers within the Hawaiian Islands. And so much so, and in addition to the fact that the native population was decimated, unfortunately, because they had no natural immunities, because they lived in an island isolated for thousands and thousands of years. And so the native population was dwindling and the kingdom needed more people. So they brought in immigrants, again, the immigrants from China, Japan, and Portugal. Yeah, so Portugal was one of the places that they brought in immigrants. And so we come to the ship, the one ship that was so important in the secret life of the ukulele. And that one ship was the SS Raven Scrag. The Raven Scrag came to Honolulu Harbor on August 23rd, 1879, and aboard it was 423 Portuguese immigrants from the little island of Madeira. And it was a sugarcane industry that brought these new Portuguese workers across rough seas, traveling thousands of miles around the Horn of Africa. No jet plane, no carnival cruise, no shortcuts. And they made landfall, and boy, do you think they were happy to finally be back on land? I think so. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you want to celebrate? And so it was reported that these Portuguese immigrants burst out into songs of thanksgiving after they deboarded. And they had this 4-stringed instrument they called the bragina or machete. And also aboard these ships were woodworkers and furniture makers who would later become the same instrument makers of this ukulele. Funny story, just on my podcast, Aaron Keim, who you may know, is a wonderful luthier. And he actually took the opposite journey. He had to replace some of his cabinets, and he'd never done cabinetry before, but he'd done plenty of ukuleles. So he figured, hey, if Manuel Nunez can make a ukulele as a cabinet maker, as an ukulele maker, I can make a cabinet. But I think it's been about a year, and so he's only partially done. Anyway, so it's kind of a reverse. These Portuguese were indentured when they came over to the islands. I think for 1 or 2 years, they had to work in the cane fields. And that is not a fun thing to do. It's hot, it's humid, it's hard work. The leaves of the plants are very sharp. Not a fun thing to do. And so after their time as indentured workers, many of them went in to find other work. And that's what people like Manuel Nunez did. And he opened up a furniture shop. But what really later on became his bread and butter were making instruments, and in particular, this one little folk instrument, later known as the ukulele. And that is how the ukulele came to Hawaii. But next, we go into the sad chapter of the island of Hawaii. Now comes the end of this chapter. And at this time, during the peak of the prosperity of the Hawaiian Islands, business owners from the U.S. were concerned about the sugarcane industry, that it might be disrupted by the practices of the monarchy. You see, they weren't very happy with King Kalakawa and what he did and how he ran his kingdom. And so they asked the U.S. to send naval forces to come and place the last ruler of Hawaii, Queen Liliuokalani, under house arrest to essentially protect their business interests. And on January 17, 1893, barely 14 years after the arrival of the ukulele, Queen Liliuokalani surrendered in a bloodless coup in order to preserve the life of her subjects. So the United States, unfortunately, was complicit in this overthrow, and they were ensuring that their citizens' business interests were preserved. And so, a monarchy falls. Now, Queen Liliuokalani was not only the last ruler of Hawaii, but she was actually a very talented musician, and she wrote many, many wonderful songs that are still sung today. People may think that Aloha Oi, by the way, it's just a little bit of trivia. People think that Aloha Oi was written while she was in captivity, and actually she wrote some songs while she was in captivity, and they were fairly pointed protest songs. However, Aloha Oi was actually written in a response to memories of journeys she used to take on horseback into a valley in a place called Maunawili. And as it turns out, I didn't even know this until much later on, that I lived in the Maunawili Valley. And so this is where, this was a place that actually inspired Queen Liliuokalani to write Aloha Oi. But to every ending, there is a new beginning, and the ukulele's life as an immigrant began anew. So in 1915, the government of Hawaii spent $100,000 of money in that time. So that was a lot of money, $100,000, to promote and celebrate their heritage and music at the Panama Pacific International Expo of 1915. It was also known as the Pan-Pacific Expo. During a 10-month stay at what they called the Hawaiian Pavilion, they played music and danced and hula. And you know what the big hit of the expo was? You guessed it. The ukulele, of course, was the big hit. And this was the first of many waves of popularity that the ukulele enjoyed. But this was the beginning of its new journey. 1915 was really the time when it was introduced to the mainland, the U.S. mainland. And it was a joyful instrument, and that's why people loved it so much. And so I'd like to play a little song, just a part of it. By the way, this is another Brother Is a song that he sings. He didn't write it, but seems like I'm doing a lot of Brother Is songs. But it's called Hene Hene Kawaka, which is a celebration, and it's a lively song about a carriage trip that a couple takes around the district of Honolulu. And so it just talks about the good times that they're having while they go on this journey. It's Hene Hene Kawaka. Hene Hene Kawaka, Kaua Lea Lea Paha, Hene Ama Amauia for you and I. Kawila Make Neke, Oni Kaukino, Hene Ama Amauia, that's for you and I. So this is the next part of the journey where the ukulele was introduced to the rest of the world, and the ukulele caught on big in the U.S. And it has gone through many waves of popularity. They even say that we're probably on our third or fourth wave of the ukulele. And of course, in Hawaii, they don't know what the people on the mainland are talking about, because the popularity of the ukulele in Hawaii has never dwindled. But the ukulele has always appeared in unexpected places, in the hands, perhaps, for example, of Japanese Americans who are going off to war in World War II, fighting for a country that put them into internment camps. But this is a picture of them celebrating just before they were deployed. The 442nd was the most decorated and one of the most famous fighting units in World War II. They were only allowed to fight in Europe, because they were not allowed to fight in the Pacific theater, because the U.S. government was afraid that they would defect, and they never did. They fought bravely and was one of the most respected fighting units. And my Uncle Shige, was part of the 442nd. So the ukulele appears in so many different places to help comfort and bring joy to people. Another place is it appears with Neil Armstrong when he returned back from the moon, and they would put him in isolation with the two other astronauts. And so he did have an ukulele to give him comfort during this time of isolation. And so here ends the workshop. But the story of the ukulele as an immigrant never ends. And today we have ukulele festivals all over the world, from China to Australia, New Zealand to Japan, Scotland, Ireland, England, Germany, all over Europe. There's at least, during pre-pandemic, there was at least one ukulele festival a month that you could look up and enjoy and go to. And so I hope the story of the ukulele continues with you, and that you have a greater appreciation of the secret life of the ukulele as an immigrant. And I so think that this is why it brings so much joy and comfort to the people that pick it up, because of where it came from. You know, it knows about hard times, and it always seems to bring joy and comfort to the people. And it knows that it's an immigrant, because it has gone all over the world from so many places. And so I'm going to just sing a couple verses of a song that I think is one of the quintessential ukulele songs of the 20th century and 21st century. Of course, it's by Brother Is. I'm just going to sing a couple verses of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Feel free to join along.
Are far behind me, where trouble melts like lemon drops high above the chimney tops. That's where I swear you'll find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, that you dare to, oh why can't I?
Mahalo, everyone. Thank you so much. And I'm going to stop sharing here and answer any questions or have a discussion.
So do we know if there's a current ukulele counterpart in Portugal?
Oh, yeah. There is first of all, they never stop playing those folk instruments. The bragina and the machete, and there's other one. It begins with a Q, but down in Brazil they play that also, because a lot of Brazilian immigrants went. A lot of Portuguese immigrants came to Brazil, and so they still play it. It's still very popular. And in fact, Jim Beloff, who's very famous in the ukulele community, on a recent trip, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, went to Madeira and played along with the people on their instruments.
I would like to see a mashup of those two right now.
Nice. What are the thoughts or questions?
I have a question. May I ask it?
Yeah.
Sorry if I missed the first few minutes. So if you explain this, what does ukulele mean exactly? Does it mean jumping flea, or the gift was brought here, or?
Right. Yeah, good question. Good question. So what does the ukulele really mean? Okay, so there's two stories, depending on whether you're a part of the royalty or whether you're part of the people. But the common understanding is that they saw these Portuguese immigrants playing their instruments, and they said, "Wow, that their fingers are flying across the fretboard. It looks like jumping fleas." So uku is a flea. So ukulele means jumping fleas. Now the royalty said, ukulele also means gift brought from afar, and so that's what they prefer to think of it. So if you're in the royal court, it means a gift, and if you're with the people, it probably means jumping flea. So there you go.
Good explanation. That's the best explanation I've heard. And to pronounce it, is it ukulele? Can you say it slowly for me?
Ukulele.
Ukulele.
Yeah, but ukulele. You say tomato, I say tomato. People understand.
Ukulele.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts or questions? Anything surprising that came out of this? Did you all know about Did you know that the Hawaii was the most remote spot on the face of the earth? So it's amazing that anyone was ever came there, Yeah, and it was all because of a bird. They followed a bird, the plover.
Well, it's just what I was thinking, that they're such adventurous people that they, couldn't be confined to the island.
Yeah. The people in the Marquesas, in the South Pacific there. And the people of Tahiti are very connected in culture. They have very similar myths down there. In fact, the greeting in Tahiti is talofa, which, sounds like aloha, right?
I think the next course should be Pacific Island mythology.
Okay.
We know a lot about Greek mythology. We know a lot about other types of mythologies, but there's so many beautiful ones out there.
Absolutely. And, the Hawaiian mythology and the South Pacific mythology, of course, are intertwined. They have variations on Hina and Maui down in the South Pacific. Anything else? Well, awesome. Well,
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
How do you say the word children in Hawaiian?
Keiki. Keiki.
Sorry?
Keiki. K-E-I. K-I. Keiki. Yeah. That means children in Hawaii, in Hawaiian.
Okay. And at what age do they learn to play the ukulele in Hawaii?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. There's not an official. Well, when I was growing up in elementary school, they did Hawaiiana class, which is where they teach Hawaiian history, and they taught us to play ukulele. But so that was what, third or fourth grade, something like that. But I don't know if they still do that. However, there's a very, very strong teaching community out there. Roy Sakuma, you may know him.
Yes.
And he has classes from all ages, and they just produce some of the most amazing students there.
Canada has also put forth some initiatives to replace the ukulele, or introduce the ukulele as the main method of instruction in the classroom, in the public school.
Yeah. Oh yeah, James Hill, his mentor.
I forget it.
Yeah, I forget his name, but anyway, he was instrumental in bringing the ukulele into the classroom, and James Hill has continued that. Have you had James Hill on?
Yeah, we actually partner with James to provide free access to his online platform to all of the kids in the club.
Oh, nice.
I think that he's just doing such a great job with that. And I do think that the ukulele is a better option for an education instrument because it's a harmonic instrument. And
Mhm.
it allows you to learn theory and harmony and melody all
Yes.
in one.
Yes, that it's a rhythmic instrument, it's a melodic instrument, and it's so easy to carry around and portable. I think that's why it's such a great uh, learning tool for music. Yeah, awesome. How many of you have been to Hawaii?
Not yet.
Yeah, okay.
Not yet.
Now you know a little bit about it, and and actually probably a little bit deeper than most people would know it. So, when you go to the island of Hawaii, the big island, look for the Ohia Lehua. I took a bike ride around there, and uh, I was astounded at how much Ohia Lehua was around the volcano area, and then I found out later on why. It's because it loves volcanic rock. Yes.
I have a question. I've seen the word Hawaii spelled without the apostrophe between the two I's and also with. So
Yeah.
what's the difference?
Well, the glottal stop is the way it should be, but westernized things, people would not understand why it's there. So yeah, it should be there, but I don't use it, but that's why. So it's really is. Go ahead.
Same thing with ukulele, right? Our advisor Neil Chin says that technically you have to spell ukulele with the apostrophe
Apostrophe.
before.
If you noticed on the beginning of my slide, I did have the apostrophe in the ukulele, but yeah. So those glottal stops were important because they helped you put emphasis in the right place. I'm not a language expert, just FYI, but that's my understanding of why they have those, and it would change the meaning when you remove that emphasis.
I asked Neil if we should then change the name of the club to be apostrophe ukulele kids club.
He'd probably say, "Yeah, that sounds
He
good."
said yes.
you, you know, yeah. Was is Tom have a question? You're, if so, you're there. Go for it. Yep, you're unmuted.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Stuart, thanks so much for doing this today. I learned about the plant, and I've been to Hawaii. I was born in Hawaii,
No
but
kid, nice.
quickly moved away, and
Uh,
I love to go back. And I've walked on the new lava on the Big Island,
yeah.
and I've seen it after only a couple of years. You start to see those plants growing.
Hmm. Yeah, now that they're, came to Hawaii, but I don't know how long it took. It would be interesting to figure out how long it took for one of those to land on Hawaii, because really that was the only way that the rest, that it became so lush. Without those initial, I'm sure there was other things growing there, but these, the Ohia Lehua and its variants, there's other plants that can live without soil, and
Mhm.
only because of them that we had the rich soil in Hawaii. So thank you, and I
Oh,
hope you get
yeah,
back there
thank
soon.
you.
Y- I just thought of something. I always thought that the early sailors from the Marquesas Islands followed this little grid thing and followed the stars, not necessarily the birds. This is the first time I've heard
Oh,
the story.
really?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
that's why that painting. I didn't do that painting, but you notice there was a bird in that painting that I
yes,
showed.
yes.
Yeah. No, that is. They would have no reason whatsoever to have gone out there, and it would have been just pure chance. But the reason that that the theory is that they figured, hey, that bird's got to be going somewhere. Where is it going? So they followed it. But of course, the migratory birds, what they did was they could fly thousands of miles without ever landing. And so they would go from from the South Pacific to the island of Hawaii, and they would rest there. And then I think they went over either back or to Alaska. I can't remember which, but there's a plover up in Alaska also. But that's the only reason that the Hawaiians came, because they followed that bird. They were going, gotta be going somewhere. Wonder where.
Thank you. That was very enlightening. So that's the aha moment for me.
Nice.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Stuart. We really enjoyed this historical themed class for UKC Academy.
Great.
So if you guys enjoyed it, please feel free to thank Stuart directly. Follow him at Ooktown, which is his ukulele podcast. And we hope that you'll come back another day for a follow-up or a Pacific Islander mythology course, which
Okay.
I would sign up for.
I have to put that together. I haven't done that one.
Yeah.
Only done Hawaii. So
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
thank you.
And
Thanks.
this is recorded. Is that correct? It's recorded.
Yes,
Thanks.
we'll send out the recording a few days after.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
La 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 la.